Hey there, and welcome back to Even Tacos Fall Apart. I'm MommaFoxFire, and today's episode is going to be a deep dive into a topic that's often misunderstood, but really does impact so many lives. We're talking about Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder, or OCPD. But before we dive into that, let's chat for just a second. We all know that life is like a box of chocolates, but we also know that sometimes life can be a bit more like a taco. It's messy, falls apart, but we still love it anyway. Have you ever had that one taco combination that's a wild combination on paper but defies all expectations and becomes your absolute favorite? Well, today's episode is a bit like that. Unexpected, insightful, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll savor every bit of the conversation. OCPD is a mental health struggle that might not get as much real attention and conversation. It's not always surrounded by a buzz like anxiety or depression or even OCD. We're going to unravel layers of OCPD, understand its nuances, and maybe even challenge some preconceived notions. I've got an incredible guest joining me today. Darryl opens up about his personal journey with OCPD, and we'll talk about his experiences, challenges, maybe even share a laugh or two. Because even in the midst of life's messiness, there's room for laughter. So whether you're a mental health warrior, a curious soul, or just someone who enjoys good conversation, stick around. I promise this episode will be like that unexpected flavor explosion in your favorite taco. A little surprising, a lot satisfying, and something you'll want to share. All right, let's get into it. Grab your metaphorical taco, or a real one if you want, and let's dig in. I forgot to turn my own mic on. I was just talking about how well I do all of this. And then I forgot
There's
to turn
always going to be
my own
one
mic
thing.
on.
There's always going to be one thing.
There's got to be. Well, hello and welcome everyone to another Mental Health Monday. I'm so excited that you are here with us. We are going to be talking about Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder, and we are joined today by Darryl Rosignol. And we have a question queue open. If you have questions that are on topic, feel free to type them into the chat and put them in that question queue. That'll make sure that we answer them while we are here and live and going and all that good stuff. And then if you have not been here before, I'm MommaFoxFire. Thank you for being here today. And yeah, feel free to just chat away in there. We will be going through and talking about, like I said, Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder. So a little bit about Darryl. After being diagnosed with Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder, or OCPD, Darryl began a 10-year journey of trying to self-heal. At the end of those 10 years, he still felt far away from where he wanted to be in terms of his mental health. At the same time, Darryl realized that he had 10 years of experience that might benefit others that were just starting out with an OCPD diagnosis and who wanted to better themselves. This was the seed for the idea of a YouTube channel dedicated to exploring OCPD. This YouTube channel, which is OCPD, My Life in Debris, eventually blossomed into a companion website. In the last 2 years, he has spent working towards expanding this small website into a full-fledged foundation, which this fall, you can, if you've got a real date, you're welcome to throw it out there, will be the launch of the first ever international foundation dedicated to OCPD awareness with the goal of advancing research in this field. So Darryl, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today.
No, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here for sure.
Absolutely. So I do have a couple of socials here if you are interested in that YouTube channel that we just mentioned, or connecting with Darryl on Instagram, or checking out the OCPD Foundation website. I just posted all of those into the chat. Feel free to connect with him. And let's dive in here. So I want to start off just by asking, you do all of this for the foundation and you have a YouTube channel. Do you have a day job to support that foundation work, or have you been able to kind of translate what you're doing for the kind of passion project side into a career?
That's a tough question, I guess. So this is what I do full time, more or less. I've been working on trying to turn what essentially was a passion project into a real foundation, with the goal of helping as many people as I can. The idea has been floated around for a while. What had happened was, at the start of COVID, I had launched an entirely different project I was working on Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder in terms of my website and the YouTube channel, but again, it was like a passion project. COVID, for better or worse, killed my business. And at that point, I'm not alone there.
Yeah.
But at that point, I decided to pivot and to really try and do something special with the foundation. So I have been working on and off on this project for, I think, 2 years now. Really working like every day on it for about 5 or 6 months now. So it is what I do, but I have a lot of odd skills, I guess, that I've accumulated over the years. And so I get hired for very random things. And so I do a lot of side projects kind of in my spare time, in the evenings or on the weekend. So between sort of, savings that I have and some of these side projects, and then I have a girlfriend. And so between the two of us, we're able to kind of keep everything afloat. Will hopefully be able to sustain itself once the foundation goes live. I don't have a set date. I can say with certainty that it'll be before September 15th. I'm working in conjunction with some other people, and so I'm not in full control of the date of the launch. But it shouldn't go past September 15th. It may launch as soon as the end of next week. It's very, 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 very close.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right now, in terms of the site itself, it's being optimized for other devices. So the desktop version of the site is more or less complete. We're working on mobile optimization, and once we get that done, we will push the site live behind a coming soon page, so that myself and the few people that are helping me out can test everything on a live setting. And that should hopefully only take a few days if we don't find anything wrong with the site. And then it'll go live from there. But yeah, so I support myself through really odd side hustles, side jobs, and hopefully I won't have to do those forever. But they enable me to do this work right now.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I know that COVID really did a number on a lot of different people, and it sounds like it kind of led you eventually to what you're doing now, which is really cool to think about, just the way that things always interconnect and come together to hopefully equal out to something really cool. And
Absolutely.
I do feel like I also have a website, and I know how much work goes into those. So I understand the, like, as soon as next week or September
Yeah.
15th.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I get that.
There's a doctor that I'm working with, and I'm not gonna say anybody's names until I've got kind of permission from everybody that
Yeah.
I can kind of announce who I'm working with. But there's a doctor specifically that had developed a very helpful test in terms of determining OCPD characteristics. It's really something to kind of guide you towards maybe seeking more help. There's something on the site that I have right now that I can't even completely verify the source. I believe I know where it comes from, and I believe it's dated from around the 70s. And it was the best thing out there. I myself am not a doctor, so I'm not in the position to create my own, test for the website. So that held up some of the site. I thought the site would be up by now, but it's for a very good reason. I think that this might be the most important parts of the site once we go live. The page that actually gets visited the most on the current site is that test from the 70s. So I know people are really interested in either taking a self-examination, or I know that there are others, we don't recommend it, but there are others that will take the test on behalf of somebody they know. They'll answer what they think that person would say to see if they can an amateur diagnosis, sort of ammunition, I think, to approach that person. So I'm excited that the project got delayed, because I'm really, really happy that we have this person on board. We're going to have a test that was developed, the last few years. It's incredibly accurate. There's a tremendous amount of research that went into putting this test together. So that kind of dragged things out a little bit, but I'm happy it did. And now we're kind of back on track with everything.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's really cool. Whenever you are working with somebody, I am also not a mental health professional in any way, shape, or form. I always make that really clear, which is why I do these, right? To connect with, first of all, other mental health professionals to kind of get their opinion on different things. And then also people with lived experience and that kind of stuff. So it's really cool to make sure that those connections get made. And it sounds like you are working with all the right people, which is really neat.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
When you're not working on the foundation and your YouTube channel, what do you enjoy doing?
What I enjoy doing versus what I actually have time to do?
Two different questions, right?
Yeah, two different questions. It's been a while since I've focused on kind of personal passions and things, but so my lifestyle involves a lot of travel by choice. I'm nomadic. The term digital nomad gets floated out there a lot. Most of us that have this lifestyle don't love the term, but neither here nor there. So I am nomadic. I generally move every 2 to 3 months. So travel is a big part of my life, and I hope that continues indefinitely. And then when I'm able to squeeze it in, I like indoor rock climbing. That's something I'm semi-passionate about, or something I've gotten into in recent years. I mentioned when we were talking earlier that I DJ. That's something that I love to do. That's another thing that COVID killed for me, and I just haven't really got back to it since. Eating new interesting foods. When we travel, like culturally, that's a really interesting aspect of it. Meeting new people from all the places that we go to. So that's definitely a few things that I try to fit in.
That's neat. So you move, you like pack up and move stuff, or do you live in something that is movable, or?
I generally move either country or city every months. Yeah. So everything that I has to fit in basically 2 suitcases and a carry-on. And that's what I live with.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. It has its own set of unique challenges, but it's amazing. I'm in the U.S. at the moment. My girlfriend and I have an apartment in the U.S. that is near to family.
Mm-hmm.
It's near to her family, and so we come here for short stints here and there. So we do have a place that we like behind me. We like to collect art, and so we got a place to hang it up. And that's more or less what our apartment is. It's a place to hang art.
That's awesome.
And we're here for a few weeks here and there, but most of the time we're outside of the U.S.
Yeah, home base is an art gallery. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Do you have a serial killer or true crime story that fascinates you?
I don't watch a lot of serial killer documentaries. I have seen some. But the most recent thing I've watched in terms of true crime that was cool was I forget the name of it, but it had to do with an art heist that took place in Boston. Considered to be the highest amount of art in terms of value ever recorded. It was so I was in Boston recently. And went to this art museum, this beautiful, beautiful art museum. I can't remember the name right now.
The Gardner Museum?
Yes, that's it. The Gardner Museum. So I went to the Gardner Museum, and I posted something online about being there. And a friend of mine asked me if that's where I was. And this friend was from the Philippines. So I'm like, how would you possibly know that I'm at the Gardner Museum in Boston?
Yeah.
And so they said, I'd watched this the documentary. I think it was on Netflix. And so they sent it. And it's completely unsolved. And super, super interesting. So that's the most recent thing that I watched in terms of that. And I really enjoyed that.
There's like a massive reward for information also on that one, because it is still unsolved, and because it is an art gallery, and I'm talking like millions. It's millions of dollars of a reward
Yeah,
for
and
information on it.
it's super fascinating because what would they have done with the art? These are famous paintings. So
Right.
anybody that has these pieces of art would have it for the sole purpose of just looking at it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't hang this in your house and show it to guests.
Right.
And so I don't know who bought it and why they bought it. And they would be the only ones that would ever be able to look at this art. It's very, very identifiable
Yeah.
stolen art. So yeah, people have some interesting motivations. That's what I'd really like to know.
Yeah.
And that was the interesting part to me. Why? What are they doing with it, and why?
Mm-hmm. Someone eventually is going to inherit an art collection from a deceased relative and be like, "Oh shit, this is from there,"
and then immediately have it taken away.
Yeah, right? Yep. So moving to our topic for the night, can you explain the kind of key differences between obsessive compulsive disorder and obsessive compulsive personality disorder for those of us who might not be familiar with the differences?
Absolutely. First off, it's I had nothing to do with the naming. It's super unfortunate that they share such a similar name. Most people that I've run into have never heard of obsessive compulsive personality disorder. I mean, when I say it, they think they have because they think I'm just saying obsessive compulsive disorder in a funny way.
Right.
But obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, for the people that have it's kind of what it sounds like. You have obsessions, you have compulsions. There are these things that you need to do. There's usually an irrational reason for doing these things. Can't step on a crack on the sidewalk because my grandmother's going to die, along those lines. And another a key aspect of OCD is that for the person that has OCD, they're very, very aware that they have it, under any misconception that they're normal and everybody else is fine. So there's an awareness, and it's usually an irrational fear that motivates these compulsions. For obsessive compulsive personality disorder, it is possible outwardly share some similarities. So a common trait or compulsion for people with OCD might be to wash their hands frequently. Be the same for a person with OCPD. However, the reason for doing it is going to be different. The reason for doing it is that they're going to believe that it is the right way. This is the correct thing to do. Somebody that doesn't have the disorder may think that that's whatever their reasoning is irrational, but to them it's not an irrational thing. They might believe that's the correct number of times to wash your hands to make sure that you don't get sick. And that might be slightly irrational, but they do believe it. And there is some, you can kind of make sense of the rationale behind it. So that's one element. You're going to have compulsions, but they're going to be on this feeling of I'm right. This is the right way to do something. And then there's going to be a real high resistance diagnosis, meaning that the person with the disorder is not going to believe that they're disordered. They're going to believe that everybody else is wrong and that they're right. It makes treatment very difficult. It makes diagnosing very difficult. And then another important aspect is that they tend to see the world in black and white. For me, it was most things. So I should say I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I don't know if that was mentioned. For me, it was most areas in which I saw things in black and white. There's not a lot of gray. For other people with obsessive compulsive personality disorder, it might only be certain areas that they feel strongly about. But it could be something as non-important as musical taste. Be that the Beatles are better than the Stones, and if you say otherwise, then you're an idiot.
Right.
And there's not a lot of kindness involved with OCPD, so it might that might be the nicest way they would say it. So yeah, in terms of black and white thinking, it's very strong, and it's usually not just a self belief. It's a belief that this this should extend, my thinking should extend to everybody else as well. So I would say those are the primary differences. They are very different disorders, but those are really kind of easy ways to identify the two.
Yeah. And I know that OCD can be triggered by like events, right, in your life. That could just be something that you could have something that caused you to have OCD.
Yes.
And then OCPD being a personality disorder, I would assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume it's something that you're basically born with, right?
The science is very, very, very much out on this. I think for two reasons. I think one, it's underfunded. I don't think that there's enough people kind of paying attention to it. But also, they're just tricky, right? The mind is a very tricky place. I remember. So the business I mentioned earlier that I had at the start of COVID, I wanted there to be a charitable element to it. And I was working with artists and I wanted them to be able to pick charities. And one had chosen the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And so I had done a lot of research into Parkinson's. And up until that point, I wasn't aware that we've not solved a single brain disorder or brain disease. That's how little we know about the brain.
Yeah.
There's not a single disorder or disease or condition out there in terms of the brain that we've been able to solve. So, secondarily, I think. Now I'm trying to go back and answer your question. So I don't. The science is very much out, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a hard thing to know for sure. But my best educated guess is that. Something that you're sort of born with. It's a proclivity that can lie dormant. Depending on your upbringing, you may or may not develop it.
That's
That's the
fair.
opinion of a
Yeah.
lot of doctors that I've spoken with, and I think that's what I would believe as well.
Yeah. And I mean, even as you're saying that, like I'm going to contradict my own self now because uh, folks with borderline personality disorder, that's not something that you're necessarily born with, but it can be caused by trauma in childhood. So even that is, my question was a little flawed.
No,
but
no,
but
and
the
I
way
mean, I
that it comes
think,
about is different.
yeah, I think you were very close in timing, right? I
Yeah.
don't know about born with, but it is something
Yeah.
that would develop in
Yeah.
childhood. OCPD is not something that you're going to develop as an adult. I mean, it'll develop as you're, more and more as you become an
Sure.
adult. But in terms of what causes it to begin with, that's going to be something very early on in life.
Absolutely. You talked about OCPD being a little bit overlooked, a little bit misunderstood. What are some kind of common misconceptions about OCPD that you want to address or clarify?
I think there's a few. There's able to diagnose their loved ones or people in their life kind of without their knowledge. So basically, a spouse might have an issue with their partner and start doing some research and come across OCPD and immediately think I've found the answer. You may have found the answer, but there's a rush to do that, and there are a lot of overlapping traits and symptoms in terms of this disorder. There can be overlapping traits with narcissistic personality disorder, obviously OCD. There is I'm drawing a blank right now. I was just recently diagnosed with ODD, and I'm forgetting.
Oppositional defiance disorder.
Yes, that's the one. So I was just recently diagnosed with that, and that overlaps with a lot of people that have OCPD, or it could be that you just have that and you don't have OCPD. So I would say there's something to think about right there in terms of not rushing to diagnose somebody else. Most people haven't heard of the disorder, so I would say that there's not a lot of preconceived notions that I would describe as inaccurate. But for those that are kind of dipping their toes in, another one, I guess, that comes up quite frequently is that all people with OCPD are angry. And some people go as far as to say abusive. I feel that that is, be careful with that, because it definitely isn't true. There are plenty of people with OCPD of varying levels that are not abusive at all. And those tend to just keep more to themselves, I think, than anything. There's a huge variance in personality with people with this disorder. So that's the one that I worry about the most, is that for people that do know about it, there is a tendency to believe that we're unlovable. That's something that comes up, and that we tend to be angry and can also be abusive. And that's not to say it doesn't happen. It does, but that isn't a prerequisite of having the disorder.
Yeah. I mean, just like somebody with depression or anxiety is going to look different from person to person, right? It is very
Absolutely
much an individual thing. My depression does not look like someone else's depression. And so that's something you got to take into account, no matter what the diagnosis is, assuming that there is an actual diagnosis. That's a really good point too.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Can you share your personal journey of being diagnosed with OCPD and the kind of the challenges that you faced? In your bio, you mentioned this 10-year self-healing process. So what were some of the challenges that you faced during that self-healing process?
I think a really important challenge happens right at the start. I've been married a couple of times. It doesn't please me to say that, but that is the truth, and I'm honest about that on my YouTube channel. And so the OCPD around towards the end of my second marriage, and I kind of did what I've talked about others doing, which is to Google a bunch of symptoms. And I'd never kind of strung all of them together into a search. And I came upon an article on OCPD, and I think a lot of people have this experience, and probably with other disorders as well. But it was like reading my own biography.
Mm-hmm.
It was really eye-opening. It was a bit shocking. So getting to the first challenge, which is belief that everything that you believe in life, everything that you think, everything that you believe stems from this disordered mind. And it's hard to put into words, but you quickly develop this fear that you don't know who you are, and that you don't know if it's possible to change, but you think, well, if I do change, am I not going to believe anything? What do I believe? What do I believe that isn't being shaped by this disorder? Mm-hmm. So I grew up in a religious family, and religion was talked about in this article. And it said that people, despite maybe being shown evidence, to the contrary, would cling on to a belief that had been instilled in them. So long story short, I just was like, what, do I believe this? Do I not believe this? That was a whole kind of separate journey, unto itself. But there's this huge fear that you just really don't know who you are and who you'd be on the other side of this. And do I really believe the things that I believe? So that was really challenging. And I like to bring that up because that ends up not being the case. For me, it took a long, long time to realize that. And it's part of what prevents you kind of from making progress, because you're kind of internally still fighting against, might be actively doing things to make your situation mental health, but believe it, or if internally you're struggling with that concept, you're really not going to progress, any significant progress anyway. So that was something that took a long time to come to terms with. Those thoughts can still, bubble up from time to time as well. But so during that time period, I did seek out help. It wasn't in time to save the marriage, but I did seek out help. And then it was kind of 10 years off and on. There's a lot of, moving parts in terms of getting help. One of them is that for most people around the world, that help isn't free.
Right.
Access to mental health help, in terms of just, does it exist? I talk to people in countries where the stigma is so high that nobody would even dare go. So, stigma is a big thing that I talk about in my videos, and it's going to be a big part of the website when we launch. But in terms of access to help, that was part of the reason. And then being very strong-willed, or maybe stubborn is a better word. You keep believing that you have the power within yourself to make the change. Going and seeking help can feel like a weakness. People with OCPD generally don't like to feel like they're in a position of weakness. When they were young, that kind of created the OCPD to begin with. So I would go to therapy for a while and think, I can do this. I don't need a therapist. And then I would stop going, and then I would backslide and lose all of the progress that I'd made. So it was a lot of one step forward, two steps back, that sort of thing, over a period of 10 years. And it was really just towards the end of that time period, and it just happened to be 10 years, that I finally came to realize, like, I'm not going to be able to do this on my own. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I thought that talking about it out loud might be helpful. It might be a form of self-therapy. And that's when I started the YouTube channel. I thought one or two or neither would happen. One itself, two, it might help other people, or both or neither. But I'm going to see what happens. And it was just kind of part of my journey, was just to build this YouTube channel. I didn't really have anything else in mind at the start. I mean, it more or less is still for those reasons. But that was the seed of the channel, and the kind of leading to all the work that I do now. So, long story short, it was 10 years, and then I realized, okay, I need some help. Mm-hmm. I got to get somebody else involved on a more permanent basis. And even then, it was a lot of. It wasn't too long before I kind of switched over to this nomadic lifestyle. So then that became a whole challenge as well, even having access to the help. And I've in the last years, I think now I've managed to find somebody that will work with me online. And that's not always the case either, especially in the United States. The laws are very strict about being licensed across state lines. So finding online help can be just as tricky as finding in-person help. But I have somebody that's in another country, and it's legal, and they're happy to do it. They weren't at first. It was actually COVID that opened them up to the idea, that kind of forced them in having to do it. Mm-hmm. They were very resistant. And during COVID, they thought, okay, I thought it would be about half as effective to offer therapy online, but I think his opinion was like, it's only about 10% less effective. So, for him, he felt, it's still working. My patients are still getting the benefits. Yeah. I feel comfortable with this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something we talked about that just recently, actually, on an episode, where the way that COVID changed therapy for the therapy provider and also for the therapy seeker. And it's like COVID screwed up so much that it's really refreshing to then talk about something that it actually opened up for everyone. And one of those things is access to mental health care. And a lot of the crossing state lines and that kind of thing, that those barriers are still in place. But like, I can talk to my therapist on a web session from soccer practice instead of being like, I got to cancel this week. I can't make it. The kids' schedules are too crazy.
Yeah.
So, it's really neat to think about. Yes, COVID sucks. I'm not saying that it didn't at all, but it's cool to think about the positives that kind of came out of it. And I think that is a really big one, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you don't want to go crazy, you've got to try and find some silver linings. For me, one of the silver linings was that almost every restaurant on the planet offered outdoor dining, mm-hmm. like overnight. Maybe where you are, that's common, but a lot of the places I traveled to, and then for my girlfriend's family, and then for my family, they live in the northern part of the U.S. And so most of the places never bothered putting outdoor seating because it's only going to be for part of the year. And now a lot of that's continued. So being able to eat outdoors on a sunny day is something that happened because of COVID. So I'll take it. I mean, that's all we can do.
Absolutely. It's a different challenge down here because it's freaking hot.
Yeah. No, I
So you
get
don't
that.
want to
You
sit
need the
outside.
umbrellas. You got to have the
Yeah.
shade umbrellas. That's for
Well,
sure.
you get to a restaurant and they're like, "I'm sorry, all we have is outdoor seating today. Are you okay with that?" And it's like, "No, it is too hot. I need air conditioning."
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
think it was
No, I'm
like
not a fan of the heat
108
either,
today.
but yeah.
It gets
Oh,
crazy.
wait, it was how much?
I think it was 108 today. I think
Oh,
yesterday
wow.
was
Okay.
record. Yesterday we set a record high for the day, like for August
Yeah.
20th. It was a record
Yeah.
high 109. That's not our record high, like generally speaking. It's
Sure.
gotten hotter. I think it got up to 111 for the high the other day. So it gets hotter.
Okay.
It was just for
Okay.
the day
All
in
right.
history.
I can't complain then. Okay.
But
I won't say what it was
we don't
here
get as
the other
cold.
day. I thought it was hot here the other day, but I guess it wasn't.
Look, if you're not used to the heat, it's hot. I don't care how cool it was. If you're
Yeah.
not used to it, if you're not accustomed to it, and it feels hot to you, then it's hot. That's okay. Now, you mentioned, going through two marriages. So obviously, OCPD can affect relationships, and I'm sure also work and various other aspects of life, like you were talking about. How did you navigate those challenges, and how have you now found ways to kind of maintain healthy relationships and also pursue your goals at the same time?
Um, Through hard work, really. I mean, I think that's the most important thing that anybody that has OCPD that's kind of looking ahead to the future and wants to know what they have in store. It's hard work.
Yeah.
We're all dealt a hand, and we all have to navigate the hand that we're dealt. And generally, complaining is not going to get you too far.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's maybe it's not the answer people want to hear, but it really is. It's I have to think about these things on a daily basis. I think for people that maybe don't know a lot about mental health disorders, I think what people do commonly know about it, for example, is alcoholism. And a lot of people think in terms of, once you're an alcoholic, you kind of have that mentality that you're always an alcoholic. I don't know. I've spoken to some therapists, not that I have that issue, but I have spoken to therapists about it just in terms of having conversations. And there's not a consensus on that.
Mm-hmm.
But with the personality disorder, I think it's kind of an easy comparison because people know that. So you have the personality disorder, it's not going to go away, but you can manage it, you can mitigate it, you can lessen the symptoms over time, you can make it so that you can be in a relationship. But self-awareness, mindfulness, and lots of work. I think sadly that, and I say sadly because of the obstacles we talked about before, but sadly that therapy really is, it's my personal opinion that therapy needs to be a part of the
Mm-hmm.
process in regards to OCPD. It is a very, very, very stubborn disorder, as are most of them. But this one, really doesn't like to recognize itself.
Yeah.
So it's really resistant to change. Um, I think that having a healthy lifestyle um, is really, really important. Eating healthy, making sure that you're getting the right vitamins and minerals and whatever else your body needs to function. Exercise, meditation, um, having activities that you enjoy, doing whatever you can to kind of lower your overall stress. Stress is sort of a OCPD trigger
Hmm.
in terms of amplifying it. And so if you can reduce the stress in your life, and maybe you've got a job and that's your job and you've got to live with it, but when you're not at work, are there things that you could do, for example, meditation that will lower your overall stress. Not all of these solutions work for everybody. I myself tried meditation off and on for a very long time, and I never felt like it quite worked for myself. But recently, within the last year, I tried yoga. I It's not something I would have ever. I was in a situation where it was almost forced upon me, but I tried it, and I found that to be a lot better personally for me for
Mm-hmm.
lowering my stress. So with yoga, I found that I was being put into positions that were so painful and so uncomfortable, and having to maintain them that I couldn't think of anything else. There was absolutely no way I could be thinking about, like projects that needed to be completed during yoga class. It just wasn't going to happen. And so for me, I felt like I was entering into more of a meditative state, and there's just a lot of endorphins happening as well. So for everybody, it might be different for everybody, but there's a lot of things out there that healthy lifestyle is going to, whatever that means for you, but that's going to lower your stress. And lowering your stress is really going to be an ally in terms of working on yourself and reducing the symptoms of OCPD. If you want to be in a relationship, if you want to work with people, if you want to have good relationships with family members and friends, you're probably going to have to get a handle on your symptoms. And that really just comes down to putting in the work, working with a therapist. One of the nice things is that on the site right now, although there's going to be a lot more resources, on the new site, there will be a lot of resources for people that don't have access to therapy, things that they can try to implement themselves. So I don't want it to be, all hope is lost. There are things that you can do on your own, but I just know in terms of effectiveness, and especially in trying to work on yourself within maybe a shorter period of time, like therapy is really your best option. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have that as an option, you're not completely alone. There are things that you can do. There are even different forms of therapy that you can kind of self-implement. And we're going to have a lot of information about that on the foundation website, hopefully in a week or two or 3.
Right. So I want to go back and talk about the yoga thing. So how were you forced? You said you were almost forced to kind of do yoga. How did that come about?
I actually went to a mental health retreat, mm-hmm. and I think it was 5 weeks that I went, and I thought I was under the impression that everything at this retreat was mandatory. That was the impression they had given me. I went in any way.
Uh-oh, I think we might have lost you.
Yeah, I knew that it was 5:30, and do I still have you?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
I don't know that I can. Your video's catching up. Okay, so I lost your audio right at the start of your story. I lost you where you were saying that you kind of thought everything was mandatory.
Oh. So essentially, I went to a mental health retreat. I thought I thought everything was going to be mandatory, and it turned out it wasn't.
Yeah.
And if I didn't hold myself accountable, then I was just going to be wasting my time. So I was under the impression I was to do yoga. It wasn't the case, but I kind of forced myself, mm-hmm. because I spent 5 weeks, and I thought, push myself now, myself, and so that was how I got into the yoga. Like 6.
So have you continued doing yoga since then? Like, do you have somewhere that you go now? Uh-oh. Oh, we're having some technical difficulties, y'all. Bear with me for just a second. Let's see.
Froze for a minute, but I do have you back. I have your sound and video up at the moment.
I was going to say, okay, let me get this stuff pulled back up real quick. So do you have somewhere that you go to yoga now to like continue that practice after, or do you just do it wherever you are? Oh. Uh-oh.
um, like an Apple TV subscription or something like that, and they have yoga classes on there. So I've been able to use those as well to do it at home.
Okay. All right, let's see if we can. So I heard the Apple TV part and the kind of subscription and everything. Let's see if we have everything back now. Can you see and hear me? Okay.
I can see and hear you. It's a little
Okay.
stuttery, but I can see and hear you.
Okay. All right. Good. And it looks like the video feed on yours is a little in and out, but that's okay. We can keep pushing through it. No big deal. So
Okay.
what
We're deep into it now, so
I know we're already here. Listen, it's all good. What advice would you give to someone who has recently been diagnosed with OCPD or who is struggling with those symptoms? How can they find hope and make progress on their own journey, especially just starting out?
So in terms of advice for somebody that's just been diagnosed, or again, like what happened with me, initially kind of finding it online, and I did eventually see somebody and receive a diagnosis. I would say if you've just discovered it and you're wondering, I would say find a therapist. That's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but that's going to be, I would say, the first step. Self-diagnose. Don't assume. All of the things that you would want to do in terms of treatment are going to be good for any mental health issue you're facing.
Yeah.
Don't wait to start, having a healthy lifestyle. All of those things you can do right away. But regardless of whether you have the disorder, but seeking out help is the first thing that you want to do. What I would talk about is, I guess, therapist. I think this is really, really key. One major hurdle for people with OCPD is that they don't want to work with a therapist that is not familiar with OCPD.
Sure.
And as shocking as that is, there are therapists that are not familiar with this disorder. The DSM, every therapist should be familiar with the disorder, but every therapist isn't.
Yeah.
That doesn't inherently make that therapist a bad therapist. The most important thing when you're seeking out a therapist is that you click. That's as simple and as plainly as I can say it. You want this person. This is somebody that you're going to be telling personal stuff to.
Right.
You're going to need to have a very deep level of trust with this person, and having a personality with this person. Not that you have the same personality, but this is somebody that you can see yourself respecting along with. This is going to be an ongoing thing. So don't worry about the experience that the therapist has. Worry about whether or not you see this person as somebody that you can trust, somebody that you're going to be able to open up to, and that's going to be far more important. Obviously, the type of therapy they do and how they work with you, that is important, and you'll find out over time whether or not you're a good fit. It still might not be a good fit. They might not know enough to work with you, but in terms of dismissing a therapist, I think if you're going to dismiss a therapist right away, dismiss them because you just are getting a bad vibe. Don't dismiss them because they're not the disorder. That's what I would say. And being a I'm not a mental health professional, so I'm only willing to give out so much advice per se. To talk about my own personal experiences, and those are two separate things as well. One of the changes, kind of as a quick aside, one of the changes to the new the new foundation is that my name's not on it. This isn't a personal passion project anymore. This is a real foundation with a real mission statement that we're going to try and accomplish. And so I'm not going to be writing any of the articles anymore. Those are going to be done by mental health professionals, or there'll be contributors that may be wanting to share their experience. Clearly labeled. People will know where the information is coming from. I will continue with the YouTube channel. There will be a blog on. I will write those blog posts. They can't be in the same vein as the YouTube channel. They're be anecdotes. But aside from the blog post, we're going to have people that really know what they're talking about involved in writing the content for the site. So
That's awesome.
I don't love giving out tons and tons of advice, but what I would say is seek a therapist and do your due diligence. And you might have to see 2, you might have to see 4, you might have to see a dozen. And I wish it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
Like that. But that's the best way to speed up the process of making progress and making changes. For me, I didn't do that. I stayed with therapists that weren't a good fit for a very long time. And when I left, the only thing that happened was that I had less money in my bank account. So, I wish I had bounced around more, because I've seen probably 24 therapists, maybe even more over my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
But I wish I would have done all of that in a 12-month period instead of a 20-year. And so, that's a big part of the channel, right? Is if you can learn from my lessons, I would love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about all the time, like, if your therapist isn't working for you, because we don't necessarily consider that we do hire people to work with us and work for us, and that's a therapist's job, is to work for you. And so if it's not working out for some reason, fire them and get a new one. And that's hard to say, especially here in the US. It's like, that can be difficult. Insurance is a barrier to got to make sure that they're covered every time, and all of that. Yeah. So that can be really challenging. But if they're not working for you, fire them and hire a new one.
Yeah. 100%. I would say one other bit of advice, though, would be that there are there's very few, but there are online communities, and some people find those beneficial. Mm-hmm. OCPD is a tricky one, especially because people are highly, highly opinionated. So if you join an online community, the likelihood of you butting heads with somebody is high. Mm-hmm. Something that we're going to be doing on the new foundation site is there will be a forum. There will be a forum for people with OCPD, that don't have OCPD, and there will be a mixed one. And there will be rules in place, and it will be moderated. And but we're hoping that people will be able to find support, make friends, whatever it is that they're looking for. Hope that they'll be able to do it on the site. But there is a Facebook group that's very, very well established. There's a few. The only one that really has the numbers and is well moderated, and there's quite a few members. And I think it's just called OCPD support group, or the support group. I link to it from the website, and some of my videos I link to it as well. It's fun that you don't like. It's very hard to control, and there's a lot of mean stuff that gets said towards people with OCPD because they're mixed groups. Mm-hmm. And for some people, it's just what they need. Some people need to hit rock. People need to have reality checks. Some people read the experiences of others that have lived with people with OCPD, and it's heartbreaking, and that's what they needed to hear. And making changes. So it's different for everybody. I'm not going to judge and say what's right or wrong. Finding your community can be helpful. There is also a support group that we will be promoting through the site. They meet once a week on Zoom. And that's probably the best free resource in terms of it's heavily moderated. So you're not going to be run into any abuse.
I think I might have lost you again. Let's see. Oh, now you might be back. Can you hear me now? Oh, maybe not. Oh, let's see. Oh, you still have audio and video. Okay. All right. It might just be that I can't quite make you out in this case. That's okay. So I heard the OCPD Facebook support group, the OCPD Zoom support group. You're going to have resource on the website. I think it's really cool that you're putting kind of the forum on the website too for people with OCPD, people without OCPD, and kind of somewhere in the middle. So how can someone who doesn't have OCPD be a supportive friend or family member? And maybe let me rephrase that a little. How would you like to have been supported as a person with OCPD by your friends and family members?
That's a tough one because it's going to be very, I think, different and very, it's very personal for each person.
Yeah.
For me, my opinion of myself is that I'm pretty empathetic to those that, that have somebody in their life with OCPD. Mm-hmm. I've received thousands over the last 5-6 years from people that live with someone with OCPD. I've some pretty horrible stories. So that has instilled a pretty deep empathy in me. And I would also say, even, with the past romantic relationships, I've not left those feeling good about myself. So I'm very empathetic in terms of what others are going through when they have somebody in their life. And sometimes it's a boss, sometimes it's a child or friend. There's whatever the relationship dynamic is, and so I don't want to throw any of the responsibility onto those people. Mm-hmm. When somebody messages me and says, I've been married to somebody for 20 years and I'm at my breaking point, I don't want this relationship to end, but I don't know what to do. What should I do? The person is explicitly saying that they want to stay in the relationship. Mm-hmm. Some things that they could do. In that case, I'm going to tell them, I don't feel like it's your responsibility to do these things.
Right.
Is to stay in the relationship, and they are willing to seek out help. If this is a person that's just being obstinate and has no intention of ever improving their lot in life and working on their mental health, then I don't feel comfortable, telling somebody to stay in that relationship. Mm-hmm. Not my decision whether they stay in the relationship, but I don't want to encourage dynamic. Right. I don't think that's how this other individual wants to be supportive. Then it's just a lot of communication. It's, mm-hmm. Ask the person, like, what are the things that you're afraid to tell me? What's going on in your head that's causing you to react negatively towards me? We're in a loving relationship, yet at times it doesn't feel very loving. What reasons, and they might not make sense to you. You might not like them, but the more you talk, the more you're going to understand each other. Somebody with OCPD, that's not the easiest thing. They tend to not like to talk about their feelings, but patience and trying to get a deeper understanding and working on compromise, just discussing the things that you're not within the relationship dynamic, and asking them, like, how do I get to a better place? Mm-hmm. Not helpful. It might be deserved, but it's not going to be helpful. And so, one other thing that I tell people to do as well is to prep somebody for a conversation. I personally tend to do better if I've had some time to think on things. So, from me, I would ask my girlfriend, like, if there's something that you need to talk to me about, and you think based on past that I'm not, come to me on a Monday and say, hey, I'd like to discuss this topic on Wednesday at time. So I've got now 2 days to kind of get my brain through the worst of the I'm always doing, worst possible outcomes.
Right.
I'm going to work through all of those and get to a better place on my own. And then when we sit down on Wednesday, I'll have already had all of these, crisis in my head and all the chaos, and all of that will have taken place already. So I think kind of prepping somebody for a conversation, nobody likes feeling caught off guard. Mm-hmm. Nobody likes feeling attacked. And so I found that I've given that advice out, quite a few times over the last few years. And it seems as though people have come back to me and said that that was a good bit of advice. So I would say that as well.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, and that comes back to communication style preferences, right? If you're one who just wants
Mm-hmm.
to get it over with,
Yeah.
like you want to talk about it, you don't want to dwell on it, and you want to just talk about it right then and there, that's one thing. But if you're someone who really needs time to process, and it just comes back to how you like to communicate, and knowing that about your partner is really important too. Like you have to talk about that
Mm-hmm.
with your partner to say, hey, here's how I like to communicate. How do you like to communicate? And then kind of working around it that way. So that still comes back to just being open and honest,
Yeah.
open and honest with
Yeah.
people around you.
I find communication exhausting, but I also see the importance of it, and I'm willing to do it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's that's part of my style. My style is that I like to talk about important things for very
Hmm.
short periods of time.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that goes in my so yeah, communication in any relationship is key, and in any
Hmm.
relationship dynamic is key. But um, you got to force it. You got to pry it out a little bit with somebody with OCPD. But it's if you want to be in that relationship, then that's part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a community question from Bite Marks. She would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
My favorite poem. Uh, I used to read a lot of poetry, and I don't read much anymore. Everything I read is like mental health. I read
Yeah. Well, I happen to
health
know that
books.
she will count like a favorite song because songs are poems as well. So you can go that route if that's easier.
Um, I offhand, um,
Oh. Oh,
LA.
oh, wait.
And do you? Are we still together?
No, I think I lost you right as you started to answer. I think we might be back though. Let's see.
Okay.
Okay, I think I can
Am
hear
I
you.
back?
Yes, I think I can hear you. The video is frozen, but I can hear you.
It's a shame though, because on my end, I haven't. I don't think I've lost you.
I know. I
Once I think
know.
I keep getting the video and the audio, but you keep losing me. I think
Yeah.
it might be a problem my side too. The internet. We're in the United States. The internet should be better than what it is.
Yes.
It
I mean,
just should.
sometimes the wireless is not as good as being, all the way plugged in, but that's okay.
Right. Yeah. Um, so I wasn't expecting what I was going to say is I have a poetry story, which is that I used to write poetry,
Oh.
and I was approached, but this is years and years and years ago, and I was approached by um, somebody that I worked with at the time, and they were throwing a poetry slam in the hood
Ooh.
and invited me to go, and said that they were having trouble like getting people to attend. And so I agreed to go, and I'm not somebody that generally gets nervous. I'm not somebody that generally gets embarrassed easily.
Mm-hmm.
But I went, and and I had no intention of reciting a poem, but I was the only white person in it,
Oh my
and
gosh.
so I was a bit of an anomaly. They insisted that I get up and read a poem. And I poem that was about a bad relationship, and I guess it resonated because I had a lot of people yelling things that were not very nice about the person that was the object of the poem. But they were very supportive of me. And I ended up going home with the trophy.
Oh, wow.
So that's, yeah, which I still have to this day, because I still think that's one of the weirdest accomplishments of my life.
That's amazing.
So, I mean, I guess the moral of that is, just don't be afraid to be yourself, and to do things that are way outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
It was an amazing experience. Not because of the trophy, just to hear everybody else's poetry. It was really, really, I was really glad that I went, and that I got out, way outside of my comfort zone, go and do that.
Oh, that's cool. It's neat whenever you go and you're somewhere that it's just like, I feel like I'm the only person that's like me here. And then you kind of immerse yourself in wherever you are and go for it. And then it kind of pays you back. That's great.
Yeah. It had nothing it wasn't like I'm the only white guy. It was a very different style of poetry.
Yeah, exactly.
Wanted me to read a poem, and I hadn't written this with like I never written this poem with the idea of a poetry slam in mind. So that was what was really like, I don't know if I can do this, but
Yeah.
You take a deep breath and you swallow hard, and then you get up and you do it. And I also want to acknowledge that story was a total cop-out of the question that was asked. But I will, if the person that asked that question wants to message me through the Instagram, I will think about it, and I will give them a proper response.
All right. I will ask her to message via here.
I'll be happy to answer that.
I'll put your Instagram one more time in the chat also, just to make sure that she can connect easily with you and find out. And then
I do have favorites. Yeah. I just drawn a blank right now on the spot.
Absolutely. Sometimes you just can't think of it. I mean, I couldn't tell you my favorite song right now, so there's that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's time for the magic moment of the stream. If I can get this magic wand to work. So I have this magic wand here. If you could wave this magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory surrounding mental illness or disabilities or talking about mental health, what would it be?
That is a fantastic part of the show. I think I like that comes out.
Yes. This is actually Bite Mark who asked that question. She's the one that got me this magic wand to use.
Oh, very nice. That's really cool. Very cool. Would have to involve stigma. Mm-hmm. That's a big one for me. I think it's a really, really complex topic. I think that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of destigmatizing mental illness. But I also think that doesn't mean that, I'm trying to think. It's a very tricky thing to talk about. I guess what I've seen is a lot of overdiagnosing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of self-diagnosing.
Yeah.
Everybody else has to have this opinion. This is, I'm answering the question honestly. I've seen in what I would say is a lot, and also with the mental health professionals that I speak with, and there's quite a few over the years. Some of them are my mental health professionals. Some of them are involved in, the work that I do on some level. And there are a lot of people being diagnosed with things that they don't have. There's a lot of people being put on medications that they shouldn't be on. And there's also live in this, since media it's existed, but with the advent of social media, it's exacerbated this idea of 15 minutes of fame. Mm-hmm. And so I see a lot of people that are self-diagnosing in order to get that attention that they maybe are not receiving in their life. And that's a whole separate issue, right? And that's sad in its own right, that there are people out there that don't feel the love and acceptance that they need in order to lead, to have a happy life. But that's a separate thing. And so I see a lot of people that are jumping on different, like almost like trending mental health issues.
Right.
And want to identify with something in order to kind of get that attention. So that's something like that's the complex topic that I wish I had a magic wand so that we could kind of overnight destigmatize mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by destigmatize is, somebody with a mental health issue is just as valuable as somebody that doesn't have a mental health issue. We're all the same. We're all equal. One is better than the other. So in terms of being able to be open about mental health and not fearing judgment and not fearing negative repercussions, that to me is the work that needs to be done. And I would love to speed that up somehow, and also inject that throughout my travels, and also just speaking to people online. This varies widely from culture to culture, and so I think in the U.S. we're definitely one of the leading countries in terms of how far along we are in terms of stigma. That's not to say we don't know. We would never be able to say, I think I have depression, or I think I have social anxiety, or I think I have OCD. These things are extremely taboo. One of the saddest cases I ever spoke to somebody about was somebody that I was speaking with in, I think it was Pakistan, and they were going through a split with their wife, and there were it wasn't a custody battle. It was just they were working out the terms of the custody of the children, which is, and that's just a difficult thing in and of itself, right?
For sure.
And so they were working through this custody, and he really he realized that part of the downfall, the downfall of the relationship was that he believed he had OCPD, and he really wanted to get help for it. But there would be no way to get that help without the court finding out. That would impact his ability to get custody. So I spoke with him a few times. I tried looking into options, and kind of the self-help kind of stuff was really all that was available to him. It wasn't that there wasn't therapists, but if he went, that information would become public, and he might go from half of 50% custody down to 10% or 0% or whatever it is. So, that's why stigma is a big deal. That's why it's, what I'm passionate about, kind of aside from the OCPD. That's the thing that I would like to see the most progress made in.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's heartbreaking. I mean, I know that there are plenty of places where you just can't get any help, any support because of things like that. And I always think of the U.S. as being atrocious in many ways, but you're right. I mean, in that regard, it is a lot easier now, at least, to not admit, but to vocalize that you are having a hard time, you are struggling, and you do need some support and help, and to have people around you kind of rally instead of, oh, what, it's like
I said, we have a long ways to go, but
Absolutely.
At least you can see that it's happening.
Yes.
At least you can see that there's articles being written, and that there's spokespeople, and it's being talked about. It's not uncommon now, for example, for a celebrity to come out and talk about their mental health struggles. So, in terms of maybe people feel like they need role models, and now that there are people out there that are a role model, this is that's going to be a tough one. There's a few celebrities that have kind of been pegged as maybe having OCPD. I think there's at least one article I know of that talks about Steve Jobs likely having had OCPD.
Oh, interesting.
Whether or not that's true, I have no way of knowing that. But in terms of nobody with OCPD is likely to come out and say that they have OCPD and start talking about it. So don't, if you're watching, don't hold it. But there's a lot of other disorders people are talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Darryl, I so appreciate you joining us. I know I just posted them a minute ago for Bite Mark, but I'm going to go ahead and post your socials for your YouTube, Instagram, and for the International OCPD Foundation website. Looking forward to the full launch of that. I think that that's so cool. I just think that what you're doing is fantastic. So thank you for taking the time.
I think what you're doing is fantastic. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I get to talk to people about all kinds of different things, and it's wonderful. And I am so glad that I still do this.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of
Great.
people are glad that you do it.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. I hope that it makes a difference to even one person. That's all that matters to me, is that it helps at least one person. And I know that that is the case. So that's good. Good enough for me.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Darryl. Oh, okay. Chat, give me just a minute. I will be right back. We are going to be playing some games. So give me just a second to disconnect with Darryl offline. Thank you so much for being here today.
Very much.
What an enlightening journey into the world of obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. Huge thanks to Darryl for sharing his story with me today. I hope you found his insights as fascinating as I did. It was truly a wonderful conversation. Today's episode was full of understanding, empathy, and breaking down the stigma around mental health and OCPD. I hope it resonated with you, and if it did, share it with just one friend. Let's spread the word and make these important conversations as commonplace as, well, enjoying a taco on a Tuesday. Now, before we wrap up, I want to remind you to hit that like button, subscribe to Even Tacos Fall Apart, and leave a review if you enjoyed today's episode. Any interaction, clicking buttons on your side, really helps the algorithm, and your support means the world to me. It helps me continue to bring these meaningful conversations in terms of motivation and also just kind of making sure that I have a reason. If I know that you're listening, if I know that you want to hear it, I'll keep doing it. And hey, if you've got a favorite taco recipe or a topic you'd love for me to explore, drop a comment. Keep this dialogue going. As always, thanks for being a part of this incredible community. Remember, even when tacos fall apart, we still love them, and I still love you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep embracing the messiness of life.